recording. All right, hello, this is Geoffrey with another installment of Intuitive and Feeler Interactions. I'm here with Brownicus from PersonalityCafe. And, so this is the first time I've had the chance to speak with somebody who, or at least the last time I spoke to you, you're not really sure about your personality type, is that right?
I think it's a thing where just like, if I actually find my type, I'll just maybe want to start acting within it.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not. I think my mind or my brain just won't allow me to do it.
Okay. So do you think, now I've heard that before, even, or with other INFJs as well, that sort of sometimes they feel like their personality type description is like a should. And so they feel like, I
Yeah.
should act that way. Is that kind of what you're describing?
Kind of.
Okay.
Like I shouldn't just act within that realm just because that's what's categorized as my type.
Okay, interesting. Personally, I've never sort of felt like... I feel like personality type is valuable only insofar as it tells me something that's actually there, not insofar as it sort of says this is how I should be. If that makes sense.
It does. Like all the I like reading on all the functions,
Yeah.
and basically what my type is, or what I want to type myself to be, I just look in that area and see if I identify with it. So like basically anything I identify with, I'll be like, that's interesting finding out about myself.
Okay.
To find out about myself, just use that as something to find out about me.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And I do think that I wrote up a little sheet a little while ago that sort of talked about the major lesson that we can learn from each personality type. Because I think even though I'll never be as sort of dedicated to that certain kind of life, that certain kind of progressive life, work, kids, taxes, death, that sort of, and you can tell that's kind of my biased sort of view of like what an SJ life might be like, but I think that life still has lots of value. It's
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
and I can learn things from SJs. I can learn how to be more responsible than I am. I'll never be as responsible as them. I think that's where personality type sort of allows me to give myself a break. That there are just certain areas where I'm never going to be as good as
Yeah.
other types.
Okay.
So what are you hoping to get from this interaction, or
Uh, I just thought it would be interesting.
okay,
Maybe like some more insight into what I could be,
okay,
and just like the interaction, just even talking to somebody, because I think you are also INFJ.
yes,
Yeah. I'm not sure if anybody's really, or maybe people in general that I've interacted with have been intuitives, or I've just basically been on a surface level with everybody, but it would just be interesting to have a deeper conversation with somebody.
okay. Do you feel like you don't get that? So you feel like you don't get that very much in real life, or
No.
okay, okay, all right. Well, I mean, I understand that feeling definitely. I think a lot of the time, especially before we find, or especially before intuitives find their type, you people, even especially NF, sort of feel like small talk. We don't really like it, but it's okay if we can sort of get past it. To the deeper thing. But now I just come to understand that there's nothing to get past. With certain people, that's where they prefer to stay. That's the kind of
Yeah.
stuff they want to talk about. There's nothing to get past. They're there. They're there where they want to be. It's my issue that I want to get past that to something else. So, and with intuitives, there tends to be something more there not in terms of like depth, but I think we hold back more information in terms of what we think about, what we care about, what how we process. I think actually sensors are more straightforward in the sense that their process is more out in the open. So
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
it makes sense. Yeah.
So sometimes this is too personal a question, so feel free to not answer. But what brought you to Myers-Briggs, or what is it that sort of made you interested in it?
I guess just like on the quest to find really what you what what you are. You, you just go to Google and type in what am I really? No, but like it, to find out people think, how people take in information in different ways.
Okay.
Like I don't think I'm not sure if that ever would have occurred to me. So I've definitely become more understanding about that.
Sure. Yeah.
It's just like understanding is the basic thing, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think most people, actually almost all people maybe, sort of start out from, I think, what Jung calls an ego-identified state, where we sort of, everything we are, we think of as, the way it should be. And
Yeah.
when people aren't that way, you're like, oh, what's wrong with you? You're not like me. And I think, or Kiersey calls it the Pygmalion project, that sort of results in trying to get other people to be more like you at the worst, I think. At the best, which still isn't great, I think you just feel like people are failing you, or perhaps, although that's not something I really ever felt, or feel like they just could be better than they are, and they just refuse to be. And I think MBTI
Yeah.
helps you let go of most of that
Definitely.
stuff. Okay.
Yeah, definitely clear some stuff up.
So, was there a reason you're particularly interested in talking to me? Have you talked to anybody else?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think I wanted to chat with another, but they sent me to the forum, and I was just like, does anybody want to talk about anything?
Yeah. Okay. Um, and have you watched like Pneumoceptor's series of interactions?
I think I watched a lot of them, if not all of them.
Okay.
There's just like one long streak of, oh, let me just watch all these for however long.
Yeah, a long time, probably all those put together. Did you get any sort of more enlightenment? I mean, I know you're sort of describing the enlightenment you're getting as a sort of general, more understanding of other people. I think the other direction that MBTI can go in is sort of helping you understand yourself as well. Did you get any sort of input? Did you relate more to certain types than others? Did you get any sort of did it help you narrow down the possibilities of what you think you might be into certain areas?
Yeah. Like, I think, like, the two types are the, yeah, the two types of between is INTJ and INTP.
Okay.
I mean, I was talking to somebody earlier, and they were trying to explain introverted intuition to me, and it was explained as, well, I explained how I process information to them as like, I will take a lot of information while I'm learning something, and then, or like webs, and I'll take that information, and it's like locked in a jar,
Mm-hmm.
and then I label the jar, and that's the idea that I'm trying to express.
Okay.
And so, like, I can always think of the jar, like the overall idea, but when you try to like get the information past that, I'm just like, uh, uh, it's very hard to explain.
Okay. Um,
Like, I, I'll I'll just take in a lot of information and then I guess generalize it, and that's basically like it's summarizing a paragraph into one word.
Okay.
And then if I try to read the paragraph to you, I won't be able to read it. But I'll just keep telling you that one word,
Okay.
and then
That
say that's correct.
that's the core so you sort of take all the information, sort of sieve it through, and get sort of a conclusion about what that is or what it means or something like that.
Yeah. What? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Um, One thing I notice about TE types versus TI types is that TE types tend to have a stronger belief in an objective reality. So TI types tend to put it this way. There may or may not be an objective reality, but that's irrelevant because we can only access the objective reality through our subjective minds. And
Yeah.
okay.
That makes perfect sense.
Okay.
The yeah.
Okay. But because INTJs believe more strongly in that sort of objective reality, and so do other TE types, even including INFPs, I think, even though TE is inferior, I think it's still part of that system. That's where that absolute right and wrong comes from, is like there's a reality and there's a real right and wrong, if or an objective reality and there's a real right and wrong. If you believe just in different perspectives and you only sort of see the picture of objective reality through the sort of tying together different perspectives out of the billions of perspectives out there, it's a lot harder to say there's an absolute right and wrong.
Yeah.
In terms of values for NFs and in terms of what would it be? I guess just sort of truth maybe for NTs, or right and wrong in terms of the reality of something, if that makes sense. It's harder for me to describe that perspective, but
Um. I'm sorry.
it's okay, take your time.
It's yeah. I definitely think in not right or wrongs, because everything kind of has a story behind it, so you can't really have a clear definition of. And I like a word for um like grouped up all in one, like a set reality.
Okay.
So like, because everybody's going to perceive information in a different way,
Hmm.
so you can't really have like real real truths. The only truth you can really have is that something
It's okay. I know it's frustrating to get out those big ideas sometimes, to simplify it into language.
Yeah, it's it's like all right, let me just bounce back what I was off before.
Okay.
A set reality. You can't have the only real truth. Okay, the only real truth you could really have is that maybe something affected something in
Okay.
some way,
Right.
but like all the details is very different, can be perceived in different ways.
Okay. Yeah, well, that makes sense to me. I mean, and I think probably sensing types would say the opposite thing, that we can only be sure of the details, not the meaning, or not. We can be sure of what we do, but not of its effects. All that kind of. I think that's the kind of perspective usually sensors bring to the table, versus intuitives who seem to go the other direction. Sort of, we can validate perception, but we can't ever be sure about what the details really mean or how they exactly interact We can only ever really understand the more ethereal, but the bigger picture, and see how um, it's sort of like a person. You see a person, we can look at another person and say that's a person from our idea of a person, but we can't see the atoms that make up that person. We can't see the molecules, without specialized equipment. We can't see, if there's strings or whatever else might be part of that whole picture. We can't see any of that. We only see the sort of larger picture. If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah, I get it, I get it.
Okay.
It's yeah, just the details. Yeah, like, I'm sorry. I'm just like agreeing, but yeah, it's just the details. I almost ig not really ignore, but details that aren't really necessary to the conclusion. Like you can have a bunch of different links to an idea, but then like some aren't as important as the others. I'm trying to think of an example. Ah, I just put myself on the spot.
It's okay if you can't do it.
Maybe it'll just come up later.
Okay. So let me ask about why, what makes you think NT is the right quadrant for you? I mean, how would you? Is it? Are you? Can you explain how you reach that conclusion in terms of just quadrants? Now, I'm not talking about INTP versus INTJ, but why NT and not NF?
It could very well be NF.
Okay.
I mean, I just I'm more drawn to NT because I'll look at things. If I look at something from an analytical perspective, I'm gonna be like checking all sides of it.
Okay.
Like, and I also ask why a lot. Like, why or what is that? Why? I ask a lot of questions.
Okay.
It's like if uh terrible example, but if I just look at a cell phone, I'll just be like, what makes the sound work? Ugh, ugh. But like I won't look at a cell phone and do that, but I'll look at things in that light
Okay.
a lot of the time.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, I think if you take the extroverted perceiving processes, I think that's where people draw in information from. It's harder for me to explain exactly how FE works in me versus an FE dominant type, but I do understand how SE works. I know that when I'm asking questions, I tend to be asking very specific, detail-oriented questions, not with the purpose of actually caring about what maybe the first answer is, but I want to know what the reason is. So I try to dig deeper and deeper and deeper through the sort of levels of something, and I think that's inferior extroverted sensing to do that. Even though I'm using it, for it's subservient to NI and all the other functions above it. I think NE, when it's asking questions, doesn't ask specific questions. It more asks the what if questions. Have you considered this? What if this? Have you considered this alternative? Or trying to get a sense of the other alternatives, and quite honestly, that's not usually what I'm getting at when I'm asking questions. Does
Oh,
if that
I
makes
think
sense?
I think I'm actually getting at the alternatives. I'm not sure if I'm looking for the reason, but it's just finding the different or maybe outcomes
Okay.
or solution or outcomes like that puts less of that makes me feel better. Like if I can find a different if you're in a situation and I can find a different way out that what you're looking at, that'll get me some accomplishment or some sense of accomplishment.
Okay.
Even if it's wrong, even if it gets shot down.
But just you
But
generated
the fact that yeah,
something that somebody else hadn't thought of, like that.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's to me that does sound more like extroverted intuition than introverted intuition, but um, there's a lot of overlap. I mean,
There is, yeah.
it's I understand how most people coming to Myers-Briggs for the first time missed. I think in the official MBTI package, I read it at some point. It talks about what types mistype as most frequently. And for INFJs, it's INFP. And if I remember correctly, and I'm not sure I do, for INFPs, it tends to be INFJ or ISFP. So there's that J and P difference. Seems the instrument seems to fail to capture that one the most often, and for whatever reason. But it makes such a huge difference. I mean, in terms of the how the cognitive functions work, how the process works within somebody. But introverted intuition, I think, yes, it's drawing on things, but I think there is kind of an explosion of possibilities. But I think what helps us narrow down to an answer is a comfort working with probabilities and saying, well, yeah, yes, there are lots of possible alternatives, but some of them are just beyond the pale. So let's forget about those. Let's look at the ones that are sort of more probable, 75% or more, or 51% or more, maybe at the bottom sort of rung, until you come to something that sounds like the best answer. Whereas extroverted intuitives, they start with that same explosive process, but I think they're much better at saying, well, why are we worried about probabilities? Let's just see what other alternatives there are. Because if we start to come to closure too early, then we might actually miss something. Maybe this is the best alternative way over here. And if introverted intuition is already coming to a conclusion, it's going to miss that thing that extroverted intuition is going to consider. But the difference is that the extroverted intuitive is still, they're not going. If there's more time, they're going to spend more time generating more alternatives. Whereas an introverted intuitive is going to try to close that close that process from. It's not a triangle that sort of goes out to infinity. We want to bring it back. And that's so it's more of like a diamond-shaped process versus the extroverted intuition, which I think is more like this explosive, super explosive triangle, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that help at all, sort of, in terms of?
In terms of what I do, it's hard distinguishing between them because on one hand I could do one, but then I could also do the other, so I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
Because you could just, like, sometimes I could just go, but sometimes I will just narrow it down, because I think that's the best possible.
Is it, does that tend to be around a sort of a perceived deadline? Or is it just, I mean,
I'm not sure if it's so much as a deadline as it is, like, as I think it is the best possible.
Okay. That makes sense. Have you met any intuitives in real life?
Hmm. If I have, I haven't interacted with them.
Okay.
Because I think basically everybody in my immediate family is a sensor, and maybe most of my cousins.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not really sure if I don't. And then like even people I might interact with, because I do stay home a lot, so I don't interact with a lot of people. But other people I don't interact with, I've never really talked to them on another level.
Okay, yeah. I find that even I think most intuitives, especially extroverted intuitives, learn to sort of uh, pare down their intuition when they're talking. It's in because it's in the if you're an extrovert, it's in your best interest to, to sort of widen the circle of possible people to talk to. So um, they tend to focus away from the intuition and more on and try to sort of deal more on that small talk level. Um, Although the what happens unfortunately to extroverted or extrovert intuitives is that they'll feel unfulfilled or or feel lonely even with lots of friends because they're still not getting what they actually need from conversation. They're getting the conversation, so they're charging in that sense, but they're not getting the intuition, so they're
Yeah.
not charging in that sense. Introverts, I think introvert intuitives of all types. I guess there are only four, right? Um, is that right? Yeah, four. So we tend, I think, because we can go inside more. I can read about an idea and be entertained by that idea by myself. I guess you probably would you agree with
Yeah.
that? Okay.
The same. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes that can be bad. At least for me, I think as an INFJ, there's this weird sort of push pull with being sociable. I do spend an awful lot of time alone. If I have an option, I usually take the option to spend time alone. But um, I'll feel pushed out the door by this sort of need to connect. Before I was part of this intuitive group that I'm a part of now, I would go out and I would socialize and I'd be done with it, like almost immediately. Sort of 45 minutes, an hour into it, and I was done. I'm ready to go home. Yeah. So even though I felt really excited in the beginning to get out the door.
To go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
um, but I notice now with the intuitive group, I'm happy to be there. In fact, even when I'm getting tired, I'm still happy to be there. I still sort of am sad when we all have to go home.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't know. It's when it's more out in the open. You get I mean, when you have the ENFPs and ENFJs, and we don't have any ENTJs and ENTP sort of with other intuitives, they do seem to all come alive, and that includes the introverts too. But they seem to all be able to sort of say, okay, this sort of disguise we have to wear most of the time, we're going to get rid of it, and we're going to just talk intuition. We're going to talk feeling or talk thinking, whatever. But mostly in an intuitive way versus that sort of disguise we have to wear.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like versus I don't even know. Like what movie is that? I don't know. Or what, did you see any good movies lately?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Yeah, that one. It took me a second to say.
Yeah, that one's a kill. I don't know about NTs. I think NFs are okay with that kind of stuff if there's another level to the discussion. So, why did you like that movie? What did it mean to you, or what do you think it meant? Period, or what was the message? Something like that. I think that's engaging, but as you probably experience, mostly it's just the input is I like it, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And then you go through this list of movies, and that's the interaction.
My ace in the hole is what hobbies, because that's like a doorway to passion. I'm just like, tell me about that.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's one way I can usually find a deeper conversation, but other than that, I'm not sure how to get to get there, like get to that conversation.
Do you ever open up a can of worms by asking that question? Like somebody's really passionate about something really boring, or uh, like, oh yeah, I'm really into boating. I mean, for me, I have no knowledge about boats, and they start wanting to talk in the boating lingo. I mean, that would just sort of, and then I would feel obligated to stay there and listen to it for a bit because I asked the question. I don't know. I don't know. Would you?
uh,
Have you ever had that experience?
uh, Not so much.
Okay.
Maybe a little, but like generally not so much, but just a little. Maybe like 80-20.
Okay.
That would, yeah.
That's a pretty good record. I mean, for that question, that you
Oh,
know.
oh, not a record. Like my involvement or my interest.
Okay.
Because if I'm like not interested, I'll be like, oh, and I won't pursue
Okay. Yeah.
past that.
I know what you mean, but sometimes some people will just keep
Some people
talking.
just,
Yeah.
yeah. Mm, I'm not sure, because I don't want to seem like mean, but I think I would just end it if I was that much not into it. But if there's like a sliver, or not a sliver, just over 50% maybe of interest, I would probably withdraw from the conversation.
Okay. Would you have trouble disengaging, or do you think you could just? I mean, how would you get out of it? Just out of curiosity.
It depends on the situation and the person, and like you'd have to like if you can give me a situation where I
Okay.
can ask you of what I may need, then I can answer that.
Okay.
But other than
A scenario like, yeah, I'm not sure. I I've noticed that INTPs and INTJs too, but INTPs in particular, because of the inferior FE, they what makes sense, and I totally understand where they're coming from. One example that was given to me is, well, this is from an INTP. I used to just, after when the conversation was like over, I would just hang up the phone. I wouldn't say, okay, well, I gotta go, goodbye, anything like that. It was just sort of like, we're done talking, hang up the phone.
I
Without,
definitely had to learn that.
okay. Um,
Yeah.
but but I think actually in the end, INTPs are better, maybe even than INFJs, in adhering to the social whatever niceties. Is that the word? That makes
Standard?
the standard that makes sense to the INTP, because I think that strong TI judging function uh, is more consistent, honestly, than an INFJ. I think I get sort of engaged in other things, and I may well sort of halfway adhere to some of those standards.
Okay.
Not because I don't realize that's what the rule is, but because I'm otherwise sort of engaged. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Oh,
I'll,
I think maybe it's just like situations we haven't encountered before.
mhm.
We might not adhere to the social standard, but if we like ask the question like why is that why do people do that? And then we can have a good answer to that question, then we'll start doing it.
Okay,
So I think it's a learned experience definitely. But I think it might be with you that you innately know,
yeah, that
do
makes
you?
sense. Yeah,
Yeah. But like you might not but that's your that might be like just the way you deal with it.
right.
Or not deal with it, but you handle it or I'm not trying to say handle or deal, but just like the way you would work in that situation.
I think you're right. I think because I guess I don't feel like I have to pay attention to it because it's sort of organic. But at the same time, maybe I'm just letting it, you know, I don't know. Maybe I'm just trusting myself to not have to think about it and to just do it. But I mean, there are times when I'm not paying attention, or actually, it's not that I'm not paying attention. It's that I'm paying attention to something else. That's what gets me. Is when
Yeah.
I'm engaged with something else. That's when I will forget to do a nicety properly.
Uh, hmm. I I don't know. It might be because I can kind of retract into myself and just like think something and
Hmm.
then just do something automatically at the same time.
Okay.
But I don't know. Because a lot of things I'm not uh, like full focused invested in. I can just start thinking about something else in the back of my mind.
Okay. Yeah.
But like you might see your like certain keywords and you're like, oh, let me just tune back in for a second and then ask maybe another question. But
Okay. It's interesting.
um,
When it comes to the tuning out thing, because I do that too. I'm never sure how much of that is due to being an INFJ and how much of that is due to my Enneagram type, which is Type 9. Because I've been to the forum, the Type 9 forum, and there are quite a few posts about tuning out, which is a sort of way to, I guess, at our best, we're trying to just be accommodating to the other person. Like they want to talk, and we're letting them talk, but we're not really being present. We are half listening, or quarter listening, or sometimes just not listening at all. Like you said, you can come back to it. It's sort of like when you're on the freeway and you're not really paying attention, but
yeah,
the brake lights come on and bam, you're back.
yeah,
you're
you're
responding to that.
present again.
Right.
Yeah,
But at the same time, I know that INFJs who are not Type 9 still also talk about this idea of a sort of haze where your thoughts just kind of take you away. I know INTPs sometimes talk about that too, but I don't actually know about INTJs. INTJs to me seem pretty focused or task oriented. There's Even though INTJs and ISTJs are very different, they have different desires. They want to live their lives in different ways. The task orientation there for both of those types seems very present.
full focus.
Full focus, always trying to get to the next objective. Yeah, fulfill this objective. And I think both those types can be very intellectual. Sort of responsive to new ideas and trying to get a handle on new ideas, although they're processing it differently. But their outward behavior in terms of task orientation is very very similar. I think, it's
Yeah,
insofar as I've noticed, anyways.
yeah. I don't have a ton of experience in that, so
Okay. I don't have a ton of experience either, but we did. We're just about to hit 100 meetups, so I guess at this point I have had a lot of intuitive only conversations with people who know their type, which sort of gives me a unique body of knowledge to, or build
to work
off
with.
of. Yeah,
Yeah,
but but it's by no means comprehensive. I mean, I just
but
sort
it's,
of,
it's still something.
yeah, it's something. I mean, it's better than nothing, of course. Yeah, but I do notice sort of tendencies, and I think INTPs are better at picking out those tendencies than INFJs, quite honestly. But INFJs sort of keep more of the nuances in mind, I think, when they're approaching type or how. In other words, an INTP will look. It seems to be more looking for specific things that they mention, do, or behaviors even. But an INFJ is going to keep in mind there's not a direct correspondence. You know, there may be other things that are motivating that person to act, say, or behave the way they're behaving that are not related to type. In other words, you might have some white noise coming in, distorting the pattern, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense.
But an INTP will be able to spell it out. They'll be able to answer the question. If the INTPs in the group, if we're talking about some kind of correlation between a behavior and type, they'll be able to say what it is and why they think that. An INFJ is going to have probably more trouble doing either of those things, in my opinion, I think.
Okay.
Because it's just, I don't know how to describe it, but I guess we're allowing for more potential disruption of a pattern based on unforeseen or unexperienced or unknown data entering into the picture. And in some ways, because every experience is unique, there's always some element of the unknown. And if you take an interaction as if it's a complete whole, I think you're including some data that is going to mislead you in the future. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay.
Like if I want to put it into other words, like if you see a picture and you see another picture that's like exactly the same, but one picture might have or maybe not a picture, a statue. If you see a statue and another duplicate statue, one statue might have dirt in one area, and then the other statue might have dirt in a different area. So it's basically anything that might cloud your vision.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I like that.
Or your understanding of the. So you can't really see the whole thing and all the details, but you can see certain consistencies.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think what's always interesting to me is that INFJs. I think we're the only intuitive feelers with TI in a consciously accessible place, or that's how I think of the tertiary function, is that it is consciously accessible. You're not going to be the greatest at it, but you can use it, and you can use it competently. I think once you get down to the inferior function, that's where the problems are. And then once you get to the shadow functions, then I guess you don't really have those, direct access to those in the same way you have direct access to the your four primary functions. But ENFJs, because they have TI inferior, abhor categories, and in fact, I'm surprised even when I meet an ENFJ on Personality Cafe because of that. INFPs have TE as an inferior, so they have a similar. So that would make TI their eighth most distrusted function. So they tend to really abhor categories. And then you have ENFPs, ENFPs who they have TE in their tertiary, but because NE is their first, they still tend to really hate locking things down. So INFJs tend to be the only ones that are comfortable working with categories and seeing them as a sort of valid way of knowing, or of understanding knowledge or data or something like that. With NTs, I think you have all four types probably are much better than that. much better at that also than any of the NFs, including INFJs. But I think it's interesting that INFJs and INTPs, a lot of times, I find pairings of friends. So that my best friend growing up was an INTP. A lot of INFJs have that experience, and vice versa. I don't know what it is, but there does seem to be some kind of symbiotic relationship between INFJs and INTPs, even though we still get on INTPs' nerves because of our directive interaction style. I'm not sure if you've gotten into that idea or not.
I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, I haven't really seen that, but I think I think it. I don't want to. I don't want to like say anything, and then. All right. It's a possibility.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm not sure, and INTPs and INTJs also seem to get along pretty well. Although they operate, I don't know. From an outsider perspective, sometimes I wonder how they get along so well. But I'm sure other people looking into the NF, quadrant would say the same thing about some of the stuff that goes on there. INFPs and INFJs, I think, especially when they're first coming into MBTI, tend to have this visceral negative reaction toward each other. But ultimately, the two types of NFs that most often marry each other are INFJs and INFPs. So obviously, at some point, they get beyond all that. I don't know.
That's real?
Well, I mean, these studies I find are isolated. There's not a huge body of work, so there's always that. I think that's a valid criticism. Well, hey, isn't that just one study or two, or one small study? Yeah, I mean, it is. That's all I got.
That is what I'm thinking. I'm just like I'm just thinking, how many people maybe were involved in other things like that. Maybe you can link me the study after.
Sure.
If you still.
Let me. I'll look for it anyways.
Yeah.
I mean, I found there was another one lady. She sort of took the types of everybody at a writers' conference. It was a fairly big conference, like 400 people, something like that. And so 25% of the people who took the test typed as INFJ. I think that's an astonishing sort of finding. And it seems like, most of the people there were INFJ, INTJ, ISTJ, or INFP. Then after that, the numbers started to get pretty low into like 1%, 3% categories. But
wait, it was a writers.
Writers, yeah.
For writers, okay. No, that makes a little more sense.
I guess I didn't make my point clear. I was trying to sort of suggest that even if that's one study and there are problems with it, the fact that it's 25% is really high.
It's huge.
Yeah, even if it's.
Oh yeah, it doesn't really it doesn't validate it, but it just it makes a little more sense.
Right.
But it's still a really huge percentage.
Right.
But it doesn't validate it, but it's like a thing.
Right. It's just another point of data, I guess, for me.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I thought somebody maybe walked behind me, but then I just felt that they're still there, so I was just like.
Oh, okay. So let me ask: have you read "Please Understand Me Too," Kiersey's book? haven't
I
read
have
it?
not.
Okay. um, I sort of recommend that one. I think there's good and bad to it, but it does have a sort of NT bias in some areas, which is unavoidable, I think, because Kiersey is an INTJ. So the way he describes things is going to have that bias.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
having an INTJ bias is still pretty objective, I think, even with that bias in there. And I think I'm not sure about all of his conclusions, but most of his rationales, I think are valid. There's really something to learn from it. One of the places where I really think he found some salient differences, it comes in when you look at what we want out of relationships. Now, and this may be an NF bias that I see it that way, but he talks about NTs wanting mind mates, somebody who will challenge them intellectually. NFs
Okay.
is somebody who wants a soulmate, somebody who's going to be supportive and who's going to work, consider the relationship as this sort of third entity, something that needs to be worked on separately, in addition to each person being an individual and needing their own sort of personal growth. But the relationship is what's most important, and it's a supportive, sort of symbiotic relationship. SJs needing a helpmate, sort of somebody to help them do all the tasks and chores and go to work and raise a family, and that's sort of what they're focused on. Then SPs wanting a playmate, somebody's going to go out and just kind of experience life with them. And while I think everybody probably wants all of those things,
Yeah.
if you
But it's just like a preference, or
right.
not really a preference, but maybe what you're most looking for. It's hard.
No, that's a priority, is what I would have said.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So I'll often ask people if you could only have one of the four of those things, which would you choose? And I'm not saying you have to answer that. That's kind of sometimes that's a telling question. I think NFs tend to gravitate pretty fast toward soulmates and not really care as much about the other aspects. NTs sometimes will talk about or be really interested in the supportive aspects, that aspect of the NF relationship. But ultimately, I sort of asked them to consider whether they would be happier with an SF who would be supportive, but not necessarily intellectually challenging on the same level as an NT. If you had to choose one of those two, what would it be? And that usually gets them to a place where they can understand that intellectual challenge is extraordinarily important to them in terms of what's going to make them happy. I put it this way because happiness is relative to each of the types. So,
yeah.
What makes an NF happy is not the same thing that makes an NT or any of the other types happy, and vice versa. So
I've heard a little bit about that
okay.
in reading, just like the different labels for maybe the relationship question.
Right.
But yeah, you see different references to it. I didn't realize it was a book.
Okay. So, do you think that as a result of talking to an NF, and I don't mean like I'm a representative of all NFs, because that's certainly not true, but does it make you lean closer to that or further away from that? I'm not saying that you drew a conclusion necessarily, but is there are you gravitating more toward it, or more sort of gravitating away from it as a result? Or is it just not enough data?
To be honest, I think I might be. It might be a way.
Okay.
To be honest, because like, if you have a very a charged conversation, uh, like what what gave me the most accomplishment maybe in this conversation was where I made the imagery of the two statues.
Yeah.
And when you're doing that like all the time, that's like just that's a better experience for me.
Okay.
So if
Hmm.
I'm doing that like maybe every other sentence, that'll be my ideal interaction with somebody.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So always trying to, well, is it, uh, my visceral response is sort of that sounds like one-upsmanship, but that's not how you're experiencing it, right? There's
No.
okay. How can you describe how that makes you? I don't want to say feel exactly, but um, how that gives you a sense of achievement.
Just the that you're I was able to find a way to express myself perfectly, or I found the exact thing to like put my thoughts into. I had the word and then I lost it, but into into this, but
Okay.
in a understandable.
And have you ever had a conversation with somebody where it's constantly like that, or
Yeah,
every other sense? Yeah. Wow. Okay.
I believe so. Yeah,
And is that somebody you still have in your life, or no?
yeah, but it's not like it was an online conversation,
Oh,
and
okay.
it's not like my immediate life. So yeah,
Okay. Yeah, it is tough when it's. I mean, I always sort of promote Personality Cafe to people who come into the meetup group as a sort of, especially for introverts, as a sort of place to interact and get a general sense of things and see whether or not you relate, that kind of stuff. But there's something about flesh and blood interaction that gives you way more information than you're ever going
yeah,
to get out of that
yeah, definitely.
online interaction. So okay, what? Let's see what I want to say. When you or I saw that you sort of have a or you don't have your MBTI type. You don't have your Enneagram type. Do you foresee reaching a conclusion, or would you be comfortable
I'm totally comfortable not
not
reaching
knowing?
a conclusion.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's fine. I mean, I know sometimes I even in the meetup group I can sort of bend people out of shape sometimes, especially P types, because I think I'm helping in reaching a conclusion, but it's not seen as helping
No,
by reaching a
I
conclusion.
just like
So
the information.
yeah, so yeah, it's just about the information. Okay, that's fine. So I mean, and I think that was really difficult for me to understand, and to the extent that I mean, when I first came to Percy, I thought INFP. What actually took quite a bit of time before I, realized it was INFJ, and some of that had to do with the conflicts I was sort of inadvertently starting on the INFP forum by trying to categorize or trying to reach a conclusion, was seen as a negative thing. Where and I didn't understand what was going on in a lot of those interactions until finally I have this, or there's this one INFP. What is his name? I would give him a shout out. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But he was a Type 5 INFP, which is pretty rare. But that means he kind of calls it like he sees it. He's comfortable talking about his observations. And it was finally there where I got the sort of honest assessment of, what INFP, what's going on with INFPs on the inside. How they are sort of
Yeah.
perceiving, because they tend to, not all of them, but they have this tendency to sort of hold back in the name of harmony until
It took
you've
me a long time
really
to
crossed the border.
learn to learn to understand the behavior behind an INFP's choices,
Okay.
or who I believe to type as an INFP. Hold on, I have to charge my. I have to plug in my laptop,
Okay.
but I can still talk because it's.
You've got your headphones on. Okay. So what? I mean, what? Could you share any of that information, or what observations or conclusions you reached?
Hmm. It's just like I think. Oh, it was like I was. Okay, I was taking in the information as that they were trying to maybe manipulate me, but I was like, I don't think that was the case at all, actually, to be honest. So it was just like the interactions consisted of me being like, of me trying to get to, oh, like any IFP watching is just gonna be like, I can't believe you. Like I was just trying to get like to some. Can can we skip?
Sure. Yeah, that's always an option. I mean, I don't. If you feel uncomfortable, that's fine. You don't have to, worry about it. Okay, that's fine. I just was curious because I think INFJs. I guess we can be difficult to understand, but in terms of talkativeness, I think we're actually pretty high up on that scale. In fact, there was on Personality Junkie, AJ, who's the site's or who writes all those articles, ranked the talkativeness of people by type, and INFJ is third, even sometimes more talkative.
Number one ENFP.
ENFJ then ENFP was according to this. So, and he suggests that the reason why is because that language is essentially a system of symbols and meaning,
Yeah.
and so that's sort of what we want to do. But at the same time, I don't think ENFPs or ENFJs need to unplug nearly as much as INFJs, and sometimes it is. I think that's also confusing because INFPs are called the Crusader type, I think, by Kiersey. If I might be wrong, but I think it's Kiersey that said that, with the sort of idea that they want to go out and change the world, using their values, but it becomes tiring pretty fast, and so then they have to sort of retreat. So there's this sort of vacillation between the Crusader and the monk, going back and forth. And I think INFJs can be the same way, and we put a lot more out there with our talking for people to understand us than INFPs tend to. But if that makes sense, yeah. But sometimes I don't know how to describe it, but if I think of who I am, and sometimes what I'm trying to express is coming out left and right instead of straight. And I don't know, I think it takes a period of time before people attune to my style of communication, except for other intuitives seem to get it for the most part. And with INFPs, and I think INTPs too, not as much INTJs, but to getting inside their heads, sometimes INFJs will think, well, we're just trying to understand you, or whatever, but sometimes that's just taken as offensive by those types. I don't know. It seems like it is, anyways.
Maybe a little.
Okay.
It depends on how it depends on how aggressive it is.
Mm-hmm.
Aggressive it is. Okay, yeah, and like maybe the manner Yeah, that's still how aggressive it is. And if it's even if you have enough or sufficient information backing it up, because like if you say if you say something irrelevant as a reason to something you might be saying
Hmm.
or helping us with, we'll just be like, I just don't see the
Right.
yeah, and that's where it might become insulting.
Okay. I see. Interesting. I'm not sure I can avoid that. What I usually what helps, I think, most of the time is I will just make a statement that I view personal autonomy as something that's fundamental and of utmost importance to value in other people. So when I'm explaining something or sharing observations or even making conclusions, I don't expect that the person listening will necessarily share any of that. I fully expect that person will make their own conclusions. I may argue something and they may reach an opposite conclusion based on what I said to support my conclusion, if that makes sense. And that's perfectly fine with me. I mean, to me, they
Yeah.
still got something out of the interaction. But I think sometimes the I'm a 9, so I don't get too carried away with the sort of passion. But a lot of INFJs are type 4s and do get carried away, very impassioned. And I think that's a lot of what comes across as manipulative or aggressive is when it's perceived as being an attempt to persuade instead of just I really think this is important for
Instead
me.
of like analysis and here it is and
Right.
do you take it?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But I do recognize that I don't know. I don't want to say. Yeah. I guess everybody's kind of got a bit of that uptightness somewhere in them. It's sometimes it's on the outside. I think with INFJs it's on the outside. When my INTP friend is talking about sort of adhering to what's logical, sort of at all times adhering with what she thinks or her behavior being in perfect alignment with what's reasonable or logical to her. It sounds so horrible to me to try to live that way, but but but
Okay.
I mean I understand that I'm not saying it's not valid for her. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
um,
Oh, sorry.
no, that's okay.
My brother's cooking. How loud was that?
Okay. I was gonna say that I don't expect that kind of congruity for myself. I kind of focus on the behaviors as what I understand that people are going to be reading my behaviors, so I try to focus on my behaviors and not really worry as much about whether there's a constant congruity between what I think or believe or feel or what's logical versus what I do. So the
So
spontaneity
when
is inside, not on the outside.
okay, and when you're so when you're talking to somebody, you can be saying information and be like connected to that information. You'll have your analysis and whatnot, but you'll be more invested in how they react to it
You mean?
or their person in it and not like the information itself.
I
Even though
guess
you can look at both sides, you'll be
right.
more okay.
I'm interested in their perspective. I think, like when you said like the jar thing, I was actually struck by that because I've used the same, uh, what is it, metaphor, whatever. I've used the same sort of explanation of describing other people's perspectives. I think of each person's individual perspective as sort of a point of light on some amorphous truth that's out there. I don't really think it's ever possible to fully see it or anything
Yeah.
like that, but I think the more lights you have, and I do think of it as sort of putting it in a jar, but it's a little more complex than that because I think if I understand let's say, to other people, so I'm not talking about my perspective, but to other people's perspectives, not only do I have those individual perspectives in individual jars, but I can synthesize them. I can get something new by combining those perspectives, or taking part of their perspectives, and I can, I think even two independent perspectives can yield, innumerable other perspectives. It's kind of hard to explain, but I do think that's ultimately where I think I go when I'm talking with somebody. It's not to persuade them. It's not. I would like to be able to help, but the way I tend to like to help is just to equip them, give them information that I think has a possibility of helping them. If I just spewed random information, then that wouldn't be particularly helpful. But
Oh yeah, no.
yeah, but I try to find information I think will be helpful, but I fully expect that other person to take it, and if it doesn't work, discard it. If it doesn't work for them, discard it. If it does work for them, use it or synthesize it or do something with it that has nothing to do with how I use it myself, even. But I guess that's why I want to know the deeper person, their perspective, their reasoning process, because I think ultimately that's what matters. And what's insulting to other people sometimes is that I don't care about their conclusions. Well, I shouldn't say don't care, but I don't. that's over the top. I mean, it's not that I don't.
It's not as important as
Yes.
where they're coming from.
Yes, exactly. So, but that's where I get in the most trouble with censors, is that they'll give me a conclusion, and instead of sort of seeing it as I'm just supposed to accept their conclusion, I see it's oh, well, how did you get there? And I sort of want to explore the reasoning process, and that offends a lot of censors because their perspective is, you're questioning my reasoning. You're telling me that I'm wrong. If you reach a different conclusion, you're telling me that I'm wrong in the conclusion I reached. And that can be offensive to many of the different sensing types. So with intuitives, I don't know. I don't see it as much, except it does seem like with ENTJs, I've only met one in person, but it does seem like it's not the same dynamic with that particular type. I don't know why.
How do you think the dynamic is?
Between, well, I think it's that TE dominance. I think it is persuasive. I think what they want is for you to agree with their assessment, and they fully believe that their assessment is completely 100% in line with objective truth and what's best. And so challenges to it, and if you challenge that idea, it just gets them going because they're NTs, so they like a good challenge.
So maybe if they were explaining an idea, and then you ask a question, they might bend what they were saying originally.
Do you mean would they bend? I see what you're saying. If they thought,
and not even just bend, just add more in. Not bend.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, they would definitely. I think they would have that tendency. Now, with other NTs, I bet you it would be a good sort of healthy, not argument. Like a positive argument. If you know what I'm trying to get at. Okay. Whereas everybody's sort of I'm getting. I'm trying to understand and I'm going to revise my belief system or my thinking based on, the input that I'm getting. Whereas from an NF perspective, it just seems like conflict for no reason and a disrespect on many levels, including a level of respecting personal autonomy. But at the same time, now only with MBTI, by the way, can I say that's how they're meant to be. That's how their cognitive process works. And even though I don't get something from it, I understand that other people do. NTs and STs probably are getting something out of that, but I don't. And I suppose the only time I go off is when I'm respecting somebody else's difference, and they aren't doing the same. That's the only time.
All right. All right. Sorry.
That's okay. It's a good chance because I sort of to gather my thoughts, and I wanted to ask you if you had any questions for me. If there were particular questions you were hoping to ask or had for me.
I didn't prepare,
That's okay.
but I did see your Skype name when I saw it, and I was just like, are you a writer?
I am a writer, yes.
What what do you write?
So I have written 2 novels. One of them is out on Amazon.com. It's called The Greening, under my name, Geoffrey, and it's science fiction. I did actually have a contract to have it published with a publisher. This is years ago now, and unfortunately, that publisher went bankrupt right before it was supposed to go out on the shelves.
Oh,
So that was a
that
big,
that
yeah.
is unluck.
It was yes, exactly. It was like a burn from the universe. Yeah. But I just he had it. It was proved. It's everything. He sent me the template, apologetically, and so I just self-published it. And I have another one that's been through the copyright process and all that, but I haven't self-published mainly because I'm just not quite happy with the ending. They're both science fiction. The first one has to do with essentially it starts in the future. The Earth is dying, and they send. So it's sort of this endless, ongoing war, and they send one soldier back. They sort of realize that humanity has this sort of built-in self-destructive cycle. To kill, to destroy, to dominate, and so they create this biofluid that they want to send him back into time to sort of the evolutionary ocean, where proteins are combining, and have him release this biofluid in order to change the course of evolution. But instead, when they send him back in time, instead of being back in that world, and I do personally believe in the scientific explanation for the universe, but in my story, he ends up in Eden instead. So he has to sort of figure out how to complete his mission, given that things did not go at all as they told him they were going to go. So it of course involves the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and also the tree of life, and of course Adam and Eve and all that kind of stuff. So that's the first book. The second book has to do with this one also starts but also continues in the future. It has to do with our technology being so greatly advanced that we are able to, using string technology, essentially resurrect people, sort of tune their string energy from the past into the future, and so that the project is called the Reclamation. So the idea is to bring back everybody who ever lived back to life in the future. In this, and the technology they have in place can support that amount of humanity being present. But the conflict comes in because as they're going into the past, they get closer and closer to reclaiming Jesus of Nazareth, and that's what causes the conflict. Is that a lot of people don't want that to happen, or have sort of religious objections to something like that happening, and it sort of sparks. The way I sort of described it was in terrorist terms, which is definitely a product of the time in which it was written. But I'd like to change that. That's why I haven't published that book. But in order to derail the reclamation, essentially you have people going after, trying to stop that from occurring, and that's the conflict in that book is to ultimately this project that was meant to unify humanity, starting to divide humanity instead.
Yeah.
And then finally in my current book, which I haven't even started, it's only in like a broken outline format. Although I have I have some ideas and stuff out there, but is a departure from science fiction and will be focused more on on modern day, and I don't know, it's going to be a big change from the other two for sure, but that's probably more information than you needed for that question, but that's what I've written anyways.
Well, do you have a certain feel for the book already, or like where you want it to go, or maybe a specific event that you want in the book, you definitely want in the book?
No, I think this one is much more based on sort of interrelationships between, and just to give you a basic idea, which nobody could just copy based on my description, is I want to start. The first half of the book to be a sort of. I'm going to offer a portrait of, the people in this group, from a perspective that is hostile to them, and then in the second part of the book, I want to show that part of themselves which is missing from that original description. So somebody. Just sort of, we do have those visceral reactions toward people, and I want to show them at their worst, and then sort of show how they got to be where they were, and and how they got to be in the sort of bad part of their life they're currently experiencing, and how they're going to get out of it. It's sort of. So I guess what I'm doing is trying to take that superficial stereotypical view.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And
I was gonna say like romanticized view of maybe success,
yeah, that's definitely
or just or somebody in a better position than you are, or something.
right, or just somebody who's behaving in a way that you find offensive or nasty,
Or that,
or whatever, and
Yeah.
and to show that that behavior isn't, or that most of those kinds of interactions are just misunderstandings, are just
Yeah. Yeah.
just come
That's
from
kind
the
of how I
fact.
think on a daily
Okay.
basis.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the general idea for that one. I'm sort of going away from apocalypse
The sci-fi.
and the sci-fi for this third book. Hopefully, also that will help it sell. Versus, science fiction is definitely a niche kind of market. But the idea has been in my head for a long time. So I don't know how other writers get their visions of what they're going to write, but mine, maybe they start as little seeds of stories, but maybe I start thinking about it as a short story, and then I realize it's not going to fit in a short story. Then I start thinking about a novel and what's going to happen in the novel, and I bring other ideas I've had into that novel, and pretty soon, it's just there. And the downside is that it doesn't go away until you write it.
Yeah. In the book I'll never write, I just have like a bunch of ideas, and they're just like they're individualized for however long, and then like something will happen. I'll just find like some way like, oh my god, that would just be the perfect whatever to another part of the book,
Right.
and just it all links together like that. But I'm never gonna get it done. But I'm never gonna start it. But like I'm like in that theoretical book, that will never happen. That all makes sense.
Right. I think some people do manage to write like that. Like I guess in the literary world, Kafka wrote like that, a bunch of unfinished stories, and yet we still read those stories because he still has something to offer.
Really?
Nietzsche, in when he will to power, is sort of, it's not finished, it's not complete. A lot of the ideas are just in their sort of nascent stages, and yet people still read that. I mean, because ideas are just powerful, and in both of those. Nietzsche's, more philosophy or whatever. A lot of different fields have claimed him. Kafka's more literary, but I think sometimes if the idea is strong enough, it survives without the structure of its entire explanation.
Try it. It's good.
Well, should I let you go? Is it getting close to dinner time, or it's up to you.
A little bit.
Okay. Well, let me say it's been a pleasure talking to you, and let me give you the last word, or if you have any last questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Anything you want to ask?
I'm always sort of fascinated by, and I don't know how to phrase this without just sort of saying that, the way I process is usually because I do change my communication style in regard, or when I view somebody as, oh, I think they might be this or that type, I may change how I communicate. So I sort of, if I think somebody's a particular type, I communicate with them based on that conclusion. I don't think that makes them that type. You know what I mean? But
oh yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Okay. I mean, do you think?
In the event that they are that type, you would not be stepping on any toes.
Okay. That's what I was going to ask. Is does that make sense, or would you feel like, for instance, INFPs will often say that you should just be yourself, and what I think they're trying to get at is, I shouldn't be customizing my communication or language to a particular type. And I guess I was just, what is your perspective on doing the one versus the other?
If communicating in a certain way causes somebody stress, I'm probably not gonna communicate that way to them.
Okay.
Just because. I don't know. It's just. Hold on. Yeah, basically that. Like if something causes stress in somebody, I'm probably not gonna communicate to them in that way.
Okay. All right. Awesome. I hear you're being called to, so I'll let you go. But it's been really nice talking to you. All right.
Nice talking to you too. Thanks.
All right. Bye.